Alexander the Great, one of the most ambitious leaders in history. In just 32 years of life, he managed to fit an entire world. He led armies, he destroyed empires, he conquered almost everything that was known. But here's the question. When you have everything, when there is nothing left to conquer, what does a person feel? Victory, satisfaction, or a kind of emptiness they never expected? Tonight, we're looking at something different. Not the battles, not the strategy, but what Alexander may have realized the first time he stopped. And maybe, somewhere in his story, we'll recognize a part of ourselves. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Pella as the son of King Philip II of Macedon. His father didn't just want him to be a warrior, he wanted him to be a mind, so he placed him under the guidance of Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of the time. Alexander studied medicine, philosophy, ethics, art, and nature. From an early age, he learned not only to look at the world, but to understand it. When he was just 20 years old, his father was assassinated, and suddenly, Alexander became king. He now commanded one of the strongest armies in the known world. Philip had not raised him like an ordinary prince. He had raised him with expectation, and Aristotle had not just given him knowledge. He had shaped the way he thought about greatness. Now, it was time to turn that thinking into reality. But no one had prepared him for what greatness can awaken inside a person. Ambition is like an engine. It moves you forward, it gives you direction, and sometimes it makes you forget who you are. For Alexander, ambition was not about filling a void. He never believed he was lacking. He believed the world belonged to him, and he took it. Anatolia fell, Syria fell, Egypt fell, and finally Mesopotamia. The Persian Empire collapsed. Alexander became the ruler of the known world. But ambition has a weakness. When you win, it does not draw a new boundary. It does not tell you where to stop. So the question slowly changed. If everything is conquered, what comes next? For Alexander, the answer was simple: the edge of the world. Alexander believed the world had an edge, like a map, a line, a place where you would finally stop. So he kept marching east, and then further. When he reached India, something began to change. The land did not end. The horizon kept moving, and his army no longer wanted to move with him. They were exhausted. They had been fighting for years, thousands of miles away from home. But it was not only fatigue. For the first time, there was no clear target ahead. No final city, no visible boundary, only continuation. This is the hidden side of ambition. It works as long as it gives you direction. But when direction fades, it leaves you alone inside it. Alexander stopped, and perhaps for the first time, he faced a different question. If I stop, who am I? Alexander turned back. But this was not a victory march. After India, the conquests slowed, and with them his direction slowed as well. He was not even 30 yet, but there was no clear goal ahead. For years, what kept him moving was the next campaign, the next city, the next piece of the map. Now almost everything was his, and it did not feel the way he expected. Historical accounts suggest he began to change, more impatient, more distant. Perhaps, for the first time, he realized that what he had achieved was not enough to define him. Ambition had given him a life, but inside that life, there was little space for himself. Sometimes people reach what they want too early, and then they do not know how to stand there. Alexander's struggle was not that he wanted more. It was this. Could he remain still without something to chase? That was the first place he could not conquer. Alexander was never defeated. No enemy stopped him. But without a rival, without a clear objective, something inside him began to shift. As the campaigns slowed, the gatherings grew longer. Wine stayed on the table late into the night. Historians sometimes call this luxury. Others call it indiscipline. But perhaps it was something else. When a person no longer has a direction to run toward, they begin to move inward. And that inner movement is not always steady. Alexander was no longer just a commander. He was now a man trying to manage his own legend. He accepted divine titles. He began to speak not only as a king, but as something more. Perhaps expanding his image was easier than facing the silence underneath, because silence does not respond to power. In his final months, his temper grew sharper. The distance between him and those closest to him became wider. Control slowly began to loosen. An empire still stood behind him, but inside there was a tired young man, and maybe for the first time he began to understand this. Conquering the world does not mean you have conquered yourself. It was the year 323 BC Babylon. Alexander fell ill. The cause is still uncertain. A fever, weakness, days of slow decline. But one thing was certain. He was still the most powerful man in the world. His army was near him. His generals were waiting. The empire still stood. Yet Alexander could no longer speak clearly. When he was asked who would inherit the empire, he did not give a clear answer. According to some accounts, he simply said, "To the strongest." It was not a strategy. It was not a plan. It was an absence. He was 32 years old. There was still time he was supposed to have. But perhaps his mind had grown tired long before his body did. All his life, he had been moving toward the next horizon. Now there was no horizon left. No campaign, no road, no map. Only stillness. And perhaps for the first time, he remained there. The story of Alexander the Great is usually told as a story of victory. But maybe that is not the real question. Perhaps the real question is this: what happens when someone reaches everything too early? Alexander's tragedy was not simply his death. It was not unfinished campaigns. It was this: fulfillment is not always found inside achievement. Today, we are also chasing things. More success, more speed, more growth. But sometimes it is worth asking, why do I want this? And when I reach it, who will I become?